Well, hi there, and welcome to this online event hosted by Cornerstone Church, Portsmouth. I'm really glad that you've been able to join us. My name is John. I work for Cornerstone Church, and in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to Tom Heisman. And Tom's going to be considering the question: in a world full of longing, is satisfaction even possible? Now, the format is very simple. Tom is going to speak for about 20 minutes. And then after that, there'll be some questions and answers following up on what Tom has been sharing. Let me just quickly tell you how you can submit those questions, because we want the questions to be coming from you as you watch and listen. So on your screen now, or on the description, if you're watching on YouTube, there should be a link. There's a QR code. And from there, you can submit your questions. You can literally do that anytime. You haven't got to wait for Tom to finish his talk. You can submit questions as he speaks, or you can do it at the end. We'll give you a little bit of time at the end to be able to do that. You won't have to sign in. You won't have to leave an email address or your name. You can submit your questions anonymously. And you can also like other people's questions to kind of get it to the top of the list, so that they're definitely questions that we'll consider. I'll remind you of all that information a little bit later on. But as you see, the link and the QR code are on your screen now. But for now, let me introduce Tom. Hi, Tom. Thanks so much for joining us this evening and for helping us consider this question about longing and satisfaction. Tom, before I kind of hand over to you, you're not with us in person here in Portsmouth, so just tell us where you are this evening.
Yeah, currently in the place where I work, which is a church in Rains Park near Wimbledon, South East London. So I'm a pastor here. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And Tom, you're going to be speaking to us about longing. Just before we start, when you were growing up, what sort of things did you long for as a child?
This reveals too much about me already, John. But I wanted to be in a boy band more than anything. And if I'm being honest with you, it's still some sort of longing deep down. So maybe one day my dream will be realised. But anyway.
Okay. Well, maybe feel free to share more about that this evening. But I'm going to hand over to you now, and we look forward to what you're going to say.
Great. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me tonight as we think about this really big question about our pursuit of longing and the search for satisfaction. Every year, Spotify tells me that my most listened to artist, they kind of put that thing on the algorithm. It comes through in November. Your most listened to player of the year, artist of the year. Mine is John Mayer, often every year. And whether or not you like John Mayer's music, he's got a song in his back catalogue, there he is, which not many people know, called Something's Missing. And it's one of those songs that you can just kind of breeze past on a playlist without giving it too much thought. But when you pause to listen to the lyrics, you realize that he's hitting on something pretty profound as he sings this song, as he describes this kind of existential angst for all of the stuff that he has in his life, the material things, relational things, and yet in amongst all these things, he can't shake the feeling that something is missing. That's the refrain that keeps coming back in the song. And so he sings, you can see it there on the screen. I'm dizzy from the shopping mall. I searched for joy and bought it all. It doesn't help the hunger pains. Something's missing and I don't know how to fix it. Something's missing and I don't know what it is. And then he just goes through this list. Then he sings friends, check, money, check, a well-slept opposite sex, check, guitar, check, microphone, check, messages waiting on me when I come home, check. And yet he keeps coming back to this line, something's missing and I don't know what it is. And this is a guy who's got it all. And I just wonder, as I kind of hear that song, and maybe as we think about those words to begin with tonight, whether that resonates with us at all. This search for joy, for happiness, for satisfaction, but despite searching in 100 different places, never being able to shake the feeling that something is missing. And so let me ask you right as we begin tonight, what would it take? What would it take to make you satisfied with life? Okay, just pause to answer that question in your heads. And I don't mean a brief kind of, oh, that was nice, satisfied. I mean, a lasting, void-filling satisfaction that doesn't depend on your circumstances. Because actually, it's striking to see our lack of progress in our pursuit of happiness, despite all the gadgets and all the gear that people have, the technology at our fingertips, like we've got tonight, our comparative wealth compared to previous generations. Despite all of that, arguably, we're not actually any happier than our great grandparents were. And in fact, if things like suicide and depression are indicators, then we're doing a far worse job of being happy than those before us. In the past year, over 7 million people in the UK were prescribed with antidepressants. I'd imagine that's only gone up post-COVID and with all that's going on in Europe. In an average group of 50 people, 13 would have mental health issues, of which 5 would have anxiety or depression, and 2 would have clinical depression. There's a growing dissatisfaction amongst 18 to 34-year-olds about the way we look. Many of those in that category would consider plastic surgery or cosmetic procedures. And, with all that kind of data in our heads, I just wonder whether we actually have a much thinner life satisfaction level than we would want to admit. There was a survey done in the States recently of people who had a net worth of more than $25 million. And remarkably, respondents to that survey were generally dissatisfied. And ironically, it was money that contributed to deep anxieties. It's incredible. Most people in this camp don't consider themselves financially secure. And for that, they think they would require, on average, 25% more wealth than they currently possess. Now, you might sit there wherever you're sat watching this tonight and think that's crazy. I think that all the time. Whenever I see kind of the advert for Euro Millions on the bus go past me and the chance to win 130 million, I'm tempted to think that, if I won that, I would finally be satisfied and never want for anything again. But it's not true. And we know that deep down, I think, don't we? I read this book a few years ago. It's called Notes on a Nervous Planet by a guy called Matt Haig. Let me just read you one of the chapters, not a long chapter, okay? But it gets the whole concept of this completely. This was number 1 in Waterstones for quite a while. The chapter goes like this. It says, you will be happy when you get good grades. You will be happy when you go to university. You will be happy when you go to the right university. You'll be happy when you get a job. You'll be happy when you get a pay rise. You'll be happy when you get a promotion. You'll be happy when you can work for yourself. You'll be happy when you're rich. You'll be happy when you own an olive grove in Sardinia. You'll be happy when someone looks at you that way. You'll be happy when you're in a relationship. You'll be happy when you get married. You'll be happy when you have children. You'll be happy when your children are exactly the kind of children you want them to be. You'll be happy when you leave home. You'll be happy when you buy a house. You'll be happy when you pay off the mortgage. You'll be happy when you have a bigger garden in the countryside with nice neighbors who invite you to barbecues on sunny Saturdays in July with your children playing together in the warm breeze. You'll be happy to write. You'll be happy to be published. You'll be happy to be published again. You'll be happy to have a #1 bestseller. You'll be happy when they turn your book into a movie. You'll be happy when they turn it into a great movie. You'll be happy when you're J.K. Rowling. You'll be happy when people like you. You'll be happy when more people like you. You'll be happy when everyone likes you. You'll be happy when people dream of you. You'll be happy to look okay. You'll be happy to turn heads. You'll be happy with smoother skin. You'll be happy with a flat stomach. You'll be happy with a 6-pack. You'll be happy with an 8-pack. You'll be happy when every photo of you gets 10,000 likes on Instagram. Maybe. 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 And that's pretty accurate, isn't it? This relentless, never-ending pursuit of happiness. I mean, you felt it in just the pace of the chapter, with nothing ever quite reaching the mark. And we know that we have fleeting moments of feeling as though we've made it in life, but then no sooner has it arrived than it's gone again. This is Mark Manson. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He puts it like this. He says, the pursuit of happiness plunges us headfirst toward nihilism and frivolity. It leads us toward childishness and incessant and intolerant desire for something more, a hole that can never be filled, a thirst that can never be quenched. And I just wonder whether you feel the pinch of that we have these longings, but nothing can ever quite scratch where we itch. And so we search desperately for satisfaction in love and sex, or in academic success, or in keeping fit, or in fighting for a cause. And these things can feel nice. We get this kind of temporary endorphin-loaded high, but eventually they fail us and the spark wears off and we crash and we realize that we never really found the thing that we were looking for. And so we start looking all over again. And doesn't that just describe life? Whether you're 19 or 90, that that incessant and intolerant desire for something more, as Manson puts it. It's where Tom Brady, one of the most famous sports stars on the planet there is, quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, this is where he gets to when he says in an interview, why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? I mean, maybe a lot of people would say, hey, man, this is what it's all about. I reached my goal, my dream, my life. Me, I think it's got to be more than this. I mean, this can't be all it's cracked up to be. Now, look, we don't like facing this reality of an insatiable hunger because it just makes us feel miserable. And so we come up with various strategies to try and mute that noise. So, for instance, we kid ourselves maybe that contentment is just around the corner, that it's only a matter of time before we're truly satisfied. But the trouble is, it's just a never-ending corner, right? We spend our lives waiting in expectation. We think, well, it's all right. I just got to get through this next bit of life. I just got to finish uni or get a decent job or get promoted or get married or buy a house or have kids or have older kids out of nappies or whatever it might be. Lasting contentment is on its way. Let me just burst that bubble. No, it's not in this life anyway. And then what happens is you'll get a bit older and then you'll start blaming others for stopping our satisfaction, for getting in the way of us being content. You'd say, well, I would be happy if it wasn't for my boss or my partner or my house or my health or the government or whoever it might be. Or we have some form of kind of midlife or quarter life or late life crisis, and we just kind of constantly reinvent ourselves to try and find the thing that has felt out of reach for so long. And so we get a new home or a new car or a new wife or a new body, but this is just exhausting. And so we end up back where we started. Or we just despair, which is where Francis Spufford gets to when he writes, the day comes when you're lying in the bath and you notice that you're 39 and that the way you're living bears scarcely any resemblance to what you thought you always wanted. And yet you realize you got there by a long series of choices. Okay, there's a cheery quote for your Thursday evening. And look, there are a whole host of other ways that we could try and deal with this satisfaction itch that we just can't find any way of scratching. But is that it? Do we just resign ourselves to singing along to John Mayer and to this despairing reality that something is missing and we don't know what it is and we're never going to find it? You may well be wondering at this point why you decided to accept the invite for this event tonight, but stay with me, okay? Because what if the search for satisfaction wasn't in vain? I mean, that would be a game changer, wouldn't it? Now, before I take you to the solution, we've got to get to the root of the problem to understand why we're like this. There was a guy called Augustine who centuries ago put his finger on exactly why we are so discontent. And he says it's because our loves are out of order. Now, what does that mean? There's a picture of him there. Augustine was writing, and he was saying that all of humanity was designed to find satisfaction in relationship with God. That we were made to love God above everything else and find our ultimate contentment in knowing and being known by Him. Now, if you're here this evening and the Christian faith is completely new to you, then don't just switch off at this point, okay? Please listen in. Even if you've got dozens of objections, just listen and see if this makes sense of life in a way that nothing else does. Because Augustine there, he was getting his ideas from the pages of the Bible. The idea that humanity was made by God, was designed to relate to Him and to find satisfaction, to find full life through loving and being loved by Him. That's the design plan, if you like. But the problem is that we've all turned away from that and that we love other things more than we love God. And so we search for satisfaction desperately in other places, in anywhere other than God, in material things or in human relationships or in health and well-being or money or whatever it is, all things which might be good things, but we turn them into these God things, these God substitutes. We try and make them the place that we can find ultimate satisfaction. But the problem is that they won't fundamentally provide it because it's not what you were made for. And if you read anything of Augustine's life, you'll find that was precisely his experience. This desperate search for satisfaction, but looking in all the wrong places. There's a verse in the Bible that kind of grabs this idea so clearly. It's from the book of Jeremiah. And in it, God says this. He says, my people have committed 2 sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and they've dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. Okay, can you see the image? God is saying there's two fundamental problems that humanity has. People have turned away from him, the spring of living water, the place where satisfaction can be found. That's problem number one. And instead, they've gone and they've dug their own cisterns, their own water tanks, but they're useless. They're cracked. They're broken. They can't hold any water. It's like drinking from a cool, ever-replenishing fountain and then turning and trying to quench your thirst from the dregs of an old plastic bottle that you found in the bin. Point being, there is no lasting satisfaction to be found there. You might get the odd splash of water that satisfies briefly, but it's not enduring. So the Bible says we were made for relationship with God, but we've run from that to other things. And so the reason then why we're on this constant hunt for a satisfaction that we just can't find a fix for, like John Mayer or Tom Brady, is because we were made for something better. That's why the search for ultimate satisfaction in all these earthly things can feel so elusive. Here's a great little quote from C.S. Lewis. Okay, he's saying the same thing. He says, creatures are not born with desires unless satisfactions for those desires exist. A baby feels hunger, well, there is such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim, well, there's such a thing as water. People feel sexual desires, well, there's such a thing as sex. And then here's the key. He says, if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Or, as Professor Smith writes, he says, the insatiability of my hunger isn't a bug, but a feature, a signal that I long for something infinite. Wanting more isn't the problem. It's where I keep looking for it. And so with all that in mind, we're just going to briefly turn now just to consider a passage from the Bible that just begins to answer this for us. Okay, I'm going to read out some sentences from a true account of Jesus' life written by a guy called John. John was one of Jesus' good friends. He wrote down this eyewitness testimony of Jesus' life. And so as we come to this, okay, recognize this isn't a fairy story. Okay, these are historically verifiable records of something that really happened in time-space history. And as we look at this, particularly if you're new to the Bible, I'd encourage you to try and come at this with an open mind. I realize that we'll all have our preconceptions, but let's try and leave those to one side and just consider this for what it is on its own terms. Now, we join the account in John 6, just after Jesus has performed a miracle. He's fed 5,000 people with this small pat lunch. Maybe you've heard that story before, and it's remarkable what's happened. And understandably, the crowd are impressed. But the point of the miracle was not to make sure that these people seated around Jesus have had a good picnic, but to teach the crowd something about who Jesus is. And we pick up the story where Jesus has left the crowd. He's headed over to the other side of the lake with the disciples. Line 24. Once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats and went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, Rabbi, when did you get here? Okay, so Jesus has this huge crowd of people following after him. I mean, why wouldn't he? He's just performed this amazing miracle and given them a feast. And the reason, can you see, why they're following him around is because they're concerned about where they're going to get their next meal from. That's what Jesus says to them in the next line. He says, very truly, I tell you, you're looking for me, not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. In other words, Jesus knows the crowd are just following him for another free meal. But look at the next line. Jesus says, do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. Okay, so rather than chasing after this food that spoils, Jesus encourages them to go after something else, to go after food that endures to eternal life. See what he's saying? That there is food that spoils. In other words, there is this kind of food that doesn't last, and there's some kind of food that lasts forever. In other words, most things satisfy temporarily, but there is something which is going to provide eternal satisfaction. And so Jesus looks at this crowd who are hungry for more actual bread, and he says, look, don't put all your time and energy into pursuing stuff that is going to spoil, into temporary highs. Instead, pursue food that lasts, that endures forever. And it's something, can you see end of that line, which the Son of Man, which is just a title for Jesus, will give them. Now, big question, what is this food that lasts? What is this thing that Jesus seems to promise that will satisfy their deepest longings? In the next few sentences, the crowd think that Jesus must be talking about some kind of physical bread, that it's some kind of heavenly manna, much like what God provided for his people centuries before when they were wandering in the desert. And so they say in the following lines, "Sir, always give us this bread." What is this kind of special magic bread that provides life in a way that normal bread doesn't? But they're in for a surprise, because here's the killer line. What is the food? What is the bread that leads to eternal life? John writes this: "Then Jesus declared, 'I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty.'" You see that Jesus says that he is the bread of life, that he is the food that provides lasting, eternal satisfaction, that he is what we need more than anything else. Now, I think we miss the weight of this because we don't really understand bread. Okay, we might like bread. I don't know how much you like bread, but we don't kind of need it in quite the same way. But in Jesus' day, no bread meant no life. If you didn't have any bread, you didn't last very long. And so here's Jesus taking that image of the bread, and he's saying, look, you want lasting spiritual life that satisfies your soul hunger? Come to me. I mean, look at this staggering claim that Jesus makes in line 35. If you come to him, you'll never be hungry. And he is talking John Mayer, Tom Brady, deep down, where do I find a fix for this kind of hunger? Gone. Now, don't mishear me, okay? It doesn't mean that we don't ever feel dissatisfied with this earthly life. It doesn't mean that Christians, those who follow Jesus, are just kind of walking around with this permanent smile glued to their face. We'll still feel longings that can't be fulfilled in this life. We'll still long for friendship or for family or for financial security or whatever it might be. Ask any Christian that you know and they'll testify to that. But here's the thing, those things won't consume us, because in Jesus, our deepest longing will have been met. Which is what? Well, it's that Jesus came to fix that broken relationship with God. He came to restore our disordered loves that we thought about earlier, knowing God and being known by him. How did he do that? Well, you'll have to read on in John's account. And if you do, you'll discover that the whole mission of Jesus culminated in his death on a cross, that churches up and down the country, all over the world, are going to remember on Friday, Good Friday. Why did Jesus do that? That he might bear the punishment for our willful rebellion against God in our place, meaning that we can be freely forgiven and restored back to right relationship with the one who made us. That's why Jesus came, not to be an inspiring teacher or a good example, but to die in order that people who were once cut off from God might be freely brought back to him and have satisfying life as we were made for. And what are the terms and conditions to access this? I mean, look there at what Jesus says. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. That's it. Come to Jesus and believe. There's not a long checklist. There's not a set of rules and regulations. We just have to come to him and believe. And it's for anyone. Can you see? Whoever comes to him, whatever you've done, however checkered your past might be, whether you're rich or poor or black or white or gay or straight or men or women, young and old, whoever comes to Jesus and believes will find the satisfaction that their soul craves. Jesus promises it. And so get this, and this is a staggering thing to think about on a Thursday night, right? Lasting soul satisfaction is on the table for you this evening through believing in Jesus. Because Jesus came to restore us back to what we were made for, namely relationship with God. And that's the beating heart of the Christian faith. And that's what Cornerstone Church is all about, seeking to hold out that message of the good news to anyone who wants to listen. It's why they put on events like this, just to give as many people as possible the chance to listen in and consider it for themselves, maybe for the first time. As we land, if John Mayer happened to join this event tonight, after getting over my initial kind of starstruck awe, I hope I'd pluck up the courage just to say to him, listen, mate, you sing in that song, Something's Missing, about trying to find joy and not knowing where it is or how to find it. But Jesus gives us the answer. He says to you, I am the source of lasting satisfaction if you believe in me. And that's an offer for John Mayer. And that's an offer for you tonight. And whatever your preconceptions are of Christianity or of Jesus or of the church or anything like that, that sort of claim absolutely has got to be worth investigating. Because if that is true, then it changes everything. We'll have some time for Q&A in just a moment as we think about those things. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand back to John.
Thanks so much, Tom. Well, as Tom just said there, in a few minutes, we're going to take some questions. As I mentioned earlier, there should be, if you follow the link that's on the screen, you can submit your questions. You can do that anonymously. It doesn't require you to give details or to log in. And you can also like other people's questions. So we'll make sure those questions in particular get asked. Just while perhaps you're submitting your questions, let me just tell you about a few other things that you might be interested in. Firstly, to say if you missed the live stream on Tuesday, it had a very similar format to this evening, and you can watch that via the Cornerstone YouTube channel or via our website. The discussion was concerned whether it's really possible to sit on the fence when it comes to the claims of Jesus, the claims of Christianity. Are you 100% sure you want to be agnostic? Was the question that was considered. So if you'd like to listen to that, listen to the questions that were answered, go to our YouTube channel. Second thing to say is that next Thursday, this time next week, the 14th of April, we have an in-person event at the Deep Blue restaurant on Southsea Pier. We're hiring the restaurant for the evening. There'll be good food to enjoy. You can order your food via the Cornerstone website. And then partway through the evening, a guy called Jason Marriner is going to be sharing his story. And Jason's going to be sharing his story of how his life was transformed. A life of crime, of destruction was dramatically changed and transformed. I'm confident that you'll find Jason's story engaging, interesting, but I hope more than that, as he shares how it was the good news of Jesus was actually the thing that really transformed his life. I think and hope that you'd find that informative, something for us all to consider. So please book up if you'd like to come. As I say, you can do that via the Cornerstone website. There's details there. And finally, just one final thing to mention. After Easter, we're as a church, we're running a Christianity Explored course. It's a course that lasts 7 weeks. It's a course that's run all over the country, in fact, all over the world. You needn't commit to coming for 7 weeks. You can just come for the first week and see what you think of it. There'll be a short video to watch. We'll read part of the Bible together, one of the first-hand accounts of the life of Jesus. And then there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. I can promise you won't be kind of put on the spot. You won't be asked to pray. It will just be an opportunity to listen and ask questions if that's what you want to do. We'll put some details of that up on the website soon. But if you're interested in that course, one way that you can let us know about that is through the online feedback form for this evening's live stream. We're going to put some details of that form up on the screen now, and it'll be really helpful. We would love to receive your comments, your questions from this evening. And as I say, there's an opportunity to sign up for other things if that's something that you're interested in. Please take time to do that. We're going to take a 2-minute break very shortly, just to give you the opportunity to send those questions in or to fill in that online feedback form if you'd like to do that. I can promise you after the 2 minutes, we'll go straight into the questions with Tom. So please hang on, please submit your questions, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes' time. Well, hi there, welcome back. Tom, we've got a good number of questions, so we'll try to get through as many of these as possible. Tom, let me ask you this one first of all. You mentioned in your talk the fact that the kind of the guy that reached the age of 39, he was looking back and he said, you know, he'd reached there through the decision that reached that point after all the decisions that he'd taken in life. So there's a question here. What if I've got lots of regrets from the past? It feels like too many bad things have happened to have ever be able to find satisfaction now. How would you respond with that? Someone looking back with kind of regrets on the past.
Yeah, it's a great question, and what I'd say is that Jesus' offer is absolutely for you, and the preciousness of the Bible story, as you read it and as you discover more of the characters in the Bible, there's just a lot of people with a lot of messy pasts and lots of broken lives who come to Jesus and through faith in him discover that there is a joy that can be found and a forgiveness from the messed up life that they might have once had that can't come anywhere else. And so I just say there is something of a great comfort in that for those who have those sorts of regrets. We can look back on them as we come to Jesus, not thinking that those things are going to haunt us for the rest of our life, but actually knowing that in him there can be forgiveness and a genuine satisfaction, and that might not be found in this life. I think that's a reality. You know, we'll talk about that a bit more as we go, I would imagine. But as I alluded to in the talk, there is something of the fact that in this life there will be that longing, and that longings that aren't met in this world. But the reality is, we talked about, we were made for something more. We were made for something better. And Jesus comes and he offers to fix that we might know that something better now and in the life to come. And that's an offer for anybody, regardless of what their past might have looked like. So Jesus comes and offers that fresh start, if you like.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. Let me follow up with this question then, though. And obviously, in your answer there, you've spoken a lot about Jesus. You spoke about Jesus in your talk. What about this question? Do you think that Jesus is the only way to find satisfaction? So it's not, I guess someone might say, well, okay, it's fine if you find satisfaction through Jesus, but what about other religious leaders, other people that offer satisfaction? Is Jesus offering something unique?
I think I'd encourage whoever asked the question to go and look at the claims of Jesus and see what he has to say. And I think as you hold those up, whether it's Jesus's claims and other religions' claims or whatever it might be, consider what is the most plausible, and also consider what Jesus has to say about the exclusivity of his claims. We live in an age where we're nervous about the idea of exclusivity, but Jesus makes it quite clear that actually it's only through him that we can have that broken relationship fixed, as we talked about today. And that's the question we've got to ask, is if Augustine's right, and we do have that kind of disordered love problem where we don't love God as we ought to, and that's an issue, how's that going to be remedied? And lots of religions will offer different ways for how that might come to pass. And Jesus offers something quite radical in that it's through faith in him. And so you're right, there are lots of competing claims for how that lasting satisfaction can be found in knowing God. And I would say that Jesus holds out something remarkable and something unique, and something exclusive, and something that if it's true, then everything else falls by the wayside. And that's obviously the big question, and the big thing that I want to encourage you, if you're exploring these things, to think about is to go back to the evidence and say, yeah, but is this true?
Yeah. Okay. What about this question then, Tom? How can you find satisfaction in a religion that forces someone to go to church every week and to pay money? And I guess kind of there appears to be a lot of restrictions on the way that people can live their lives. That doesn't really sound like much of a kind of fun, fulfilling life.
Yeah. Those are three slightly different things: that going to church, giving money, and following rules. So going to church and giving money, all I say is you shouldn't ever be in a context where you're forced to do those things. So if that's been your experience of church and Christianity, then I'm sorry. Those things are a great joy and a great blessing of being a Christian, is that we get to do that. And I hope that Christians that you might know would testify to the fact that there is something wonderful and beautiful about being part of a community like a local church. And so if you haven't been to a local church, I encourage you to go and see it for yourself and see how that experience is manifested. In terms of the following restrictive rules, because it can be that you look into Christianity from the outside and think, well, it does feel like a lot of restrictive rules. All I'd say is if, and these are big ifs, right? But if we are made by God and there is one who's made us, then actually it follows that he has got the best plan for our life and the best design plan for our life in terms of what it means to live and be human. And his way is therefore the best way. And so that's what Christians are seeking to live out, is not that I feel bound to a set of rules, but rather, since now I've been brought back into a relationship with this God, I want to live in the way that he's called me to live, knowing that's the best way because he's the one who's made me. So it's that kind of following the creator's design plan, if you like. If you think about anything, any created thing, it works best when it's runs to its maker's instructions. It's the same with us, and hence why Christians seek to live God's way according to the Bible in that regard. They see it as a freeing thing.
Yeah. You may have kind of answered this question in what you've just said. Again, you spoke about a design plan. Feel free if you've got anything to add. So the question was, you mentioned about a design plan that we're made for God. But what if we don't like some of the things that God says in the Bible? What if people find some of those things objectionable, difficult to understand or to live by? Anything to add there?
I think I'd just encourage you to start with the person of Jesus. So go and read one of the accounts of Jesus' life and start there. Don't start by kind of flicking through your Bible and starting in the middle of an Old Testament passage that might feel obscure. Arguably it's not, as we see it in the light of the whole Bible, but don't necessarily start there. Start with the life of Jesus and consider who he is and see something of his character and his gentleness and his warmth towards people and what he comes to do. Start there, and then through that lens, that permeates through the whole Bible story, and you can see how the whole Bible feeds through him. And I think what you'll see, and I hope that you see, is that Jesus and his words and what he seeks to do makes sense of life in a way that nothing else does. And that's, what I've been persuaded of personally, and lots of others as well. So I'd start with him and then go from there.
Brilliant. Couple more questions, Tom, if you don't mind. This is someone, basically, I guess you've been speaking about kind of on the understanding that most people don't feel satisfied, are looking for something more, are longing for something more. What would you say to the person that says, actually, I find my life satisfying, my life's, pretty good right now. So is any of this stuff relevant to me?
Well, firstly, great. I'm delighted that you're in a happy season of life, whoever's asked that question. I mean, let's be realistic. Life isn't a Disney cartoon, and at some point things get hard. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing is that if you stay there, then you're selling yourself short. C.S. Lewis has got another quote. I'm going to misquote it, but it'll be familiar to some of us when he talks about those who are in that kind of that category of thinking that, they look down on their life and think, well, I'm satisfied now, I don't need anything else, are like children making mud pies in a slum who don't know what it means by the offer of a free holiday at the beach. And I would just, contentiously say that to you if you ask that question, that great, you may well feel satisfied now, but what Jesus is holding out is something infinitely better. It's the offer of restored relationship with the God of the universe and the offer of life eternally in his kingdom in paradise. We didn't talk about that much tonight, but this isn't just a kind of a thing now that we kind of get to know the joy of knowing God, but it's something eternal. And for you who asked the question, the reality is at some point death comes. It comes to all of us, and at that point, what happens then? And I'd say that at that point, Jesus's claim takes on a whole new level of meaning in terms of satisfaction.
Okay. Tom, I just got. I think we'll go for 2 more questions, if that's okay. I think we've covered just about all of them. Then you mentioned used this phrase a couple of times, willful rebellion. And someone's asking, isn't that a bit strong? I'm not willfully rebelling. I'm just trying to live my life. I'm trying to do good, to live a good life. Am I really someone in willful rebellion?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And I'm deliberately being a bit provocative to try and make you feel that. But I'm glad that you've responded like that. I mean, the Bible's kind of not afraid to use that kind of language of willfully turning away from God. And the reality is, though, that even if we are living our life, and even if we are just trying to do good, if we are not doing that with God in the picture, then we are living a life of rebellion, because we have turned away from the one who made us, and we've said, "I don't want anything to do with you." And that's precisely why church puts on events like this, because they want to tell people about the God who made them and say, turn back to him, because he wants to know you. And so I think, the reality is all of us are in that state of rebelling against the one who made us. But the offer of Jesus, as we thought about tonight, is a remedy to that. So it is uncomfortable to hear, but it's the only reason why it's good news is because Jesus comes and offers a solution. So we're not stuck in that state.
Okay. Tom, I've got one final question for you, and this is more of a personal question, I guess. I guess you've been thinking about longing and satisfaction, talking about the subject, but this final question is a bit more personal. So it simply asks, do you personally feel satisfied as a Christian?
So the reality of living in a world like this, where there's lots of mess and brokenness, as we all know, is that there are always going to be things that leave me feeling unsatisfied at this earthly level. My problem comes personally when I look to the earthly things in my life to fully be the thing that satisfy me. So be that my wife or my kids or my job or where I live or my health or fitness or whatever it might be. Those are all things in my life that I might be tempted at times to think that's where I'm going to put all my chips for satisfaction. I'm going to put it all on that. That's where the problem comes. But actually, what's totally freeing is knowing that having come to Jesus and trusted in him, I know that I am loved and known by the God who made me, and that I have the absolute assurance of a home with him forever in heaven. And that undergirds everything else, which means that if my relationship with my wife is going through a tough time, or my kids don't want to talk to me, or my house burns down, or I lose my job, or I get overweight and I don't want to do any exercise, or I get disabled in a car accident, whatever it might be, those things can't destroy that deepest thing which undergirds all of it, which is that I'm known and loved by God, because nothing can cut me off from that through faith in Jesus. So actually, although there are at an earthly level things that fail to satisfy me, there is something underneath that underpins all of that is lasting and that endures and that gives me a satisfaction that can't be found anywhere else. So I'm not just saying that because I'm on the Q&A tonight or doing the talk tonight. That is a present reality in my life, that I can go to bed with peace, even if everything else is falling apart, because of that comfort that I know through faith in Jesus. And I'd encourage you as well, just as I land on that, to if you've got a Christian friend, or if you know somebody who's a Christian, to ask them for their story around that as well. Ask them to explain something of the satisfaction that they know through trusting in Jesus, and ask them for their story, because these things aren't kind of abstract theory. These are real life for real people, normal people that you will know who live in Portsmouth, and it'd be great for you to kind of engage with them on how it's cashed out for them.
That's brilliant. Tom, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thanks for your talk. Thanks for your willingness to answer questions. Thank you too for watching this evening. I hope you found it helpful. And as I said earlier on, please do send us your feedback. You can do that online. If you've got follow-up questions, if you're interested in anything that we're doing as a church in Portsmouth, please send us your feedback. It's all on our website, as I mentioned earlier. And just finally, if you do want to join us next Thursday evening, it would be great to see you. Why not kind of book your place straight away? If you're anything like me, if you don't do it straight away, you'll likely forget. So why not do that now? And we'll see you next Thursday. Hope to see you then. Thanks for joining us. But for now, thank you and good night.